devil blessing your practices to keep you blinded from what God could truly have of you. So when I say that to a business guy, especially if they're a faith-centered person, it kind of like, they're like, what are you talking about? Dude, you've been slimy and taking shortcuts for years. Be thankful that that's the least amount of what God wants. You could truly be influential with the way you speak, with the nature of who you connect with, the way you hang out with people. You don't think the devil would bless that really bent character trait, pulling you further and further from the design of God? If you're willing to take a shortcut, I'll give you what you want, which means he knew the assignment on the man's life, but he was willing to give him a compromise. Does God test? No, the Bible specifically says he doesn't, but he'll commit testing. Why? Because he wants us to know what he's built us to be.
So Joshua is one of my all-time best friends. He has helped me through his programs and restoration discipleship. Maybe we'll talk about that. But there's just something special about you, bro, that you like have such a heart for God and the Great Commission. And I've literally never met anyone like you before. So, you know, we could get into like what's a Great Commission and discipleship and all the things that you do, which are amazing. But I want to start because this podcast is ultimately for business owners. Yeah. And the layperson too, but I think business owners mostly is like, to you, we talk a lot about what's a kingdom business. Mm-hmm. And where I want to go, first off, is like, in your definition, like lay out what a kingdom business is, and maybe even more importantly, what it is not. Because I think a lot of people slap kingdom on what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I've probably been guilty of this in the past, so you can call that out too if you want to. But really just laying out like, what's a kingdom business? What does it actually mean to be a kingdom business? What's God say about it? What's Bible say about it? And then I'm just going to ask you a bunch of cool questions, and you're going to drop knowledge bombs as you always do. And we'll just go from there.
Sounds good. I think one of the things that needs to be said, though, is that what you do really well is you draw the goodness of people out. That's a kingdom principle. It's beyond just the bottom line of the transaction or even the service opportunity that we're given. It's the ability to see what's inside that might be clustered or confused or whatever, but you're able to sift through it and pull it out. And I think that's something that I was given an opportunity by you to do, but you do it really well to many families and many others. So I think just that's something you should be able to walk away with, that I appreciate something that you do for me and you do for others. Now, as far as your question pertains, what's kingdom, what's not kingdom? Well, a lot of times we need to take a step back. Why are we even given permission to think that there is a difference between the two? Mm-hmm. Jesus didn't come to build an institutional church experience that's traditionally given us to on a Sunday. He came to allow, in his prayer, he says, as it is in heaven, so be it on earth. Mm-hmm. So there's this situation where whatever he came to bring, the kingdom. That's why when you get into Matthew 6:33, it says to seek first his kingdom, and then all these other things would be added. Is okay, there's a definite pursuit of what does God desire on earth. So we have to really continue to peel this thing back. And one of the biggest things to peel back is the original, or the Genesis, where man as a creation cohabitated with their creator in the Garden of Eden. So what does that look like? Well, there's no pressure. There's just this exclusive commitment of intimacy with one another. So when you start to see God's original design, you start to understand, okay, what is it required for me on an individual level? Because whoever you are inwardly is going to show up outwardly, whether it be through your business, whether it be through your parenting, through your marriage. You and I, we often talk about the tier level of importance, and you're like, you should name it. The only name I've been able to land on within a business lecture is like, I would call it the leadership ladder of leverage, even though I'm still playing with it. But in essence, it's this tier of responsibility, which is self, your spouse. If you're not married, then parents or someone of that behavioral pattern that you'd allow them to really know you on all sides. Tier 3 becomes your parenting. And if you don't have kids, then I'd say core connections. And then 4th is the occupation. And so when you get to the occupational level, that's really where you're starting to see this flourishing of your kingdom assignment, because everything else is in check and balances. And then number 5 is obviously the overflow, which is everything else. But all that to be said, the kingdom is simply a matter of taking what God's original design is that exists in heaven, which is in the outside of eternity, to a place where we're now here. So what does that look like from a business? First and foremost, we got to know what God loves and what God hates.
Yep.
God hates dishonest scales. So in a kingdom business, if I have dishonest scales in my practice, in my service, in my motives, in my marketing, and I'm eliciting some form of a sliminess, that's not making God happy. So I often, and feel free to stop or pigeonhole or
No,
redirect. Okay.
dude, you're doing great.
One of the things that I often love to confuse people with, given the opportunity to coach them and consult with them in their professions, is the devil blessing you to blind you?
Mm-hmm.
And people like kind of get caught back, especially if they're not like faith-centric people. But everybody kind of cohesively agrees that there's a God and there's a devil for the most part.
Yep.
So when I say that to a business guy, especially if they're a faith-centered person, it kind of like they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I felt like God had given me that language to get them to understand, like, what's the motive? What are you really doing? Because if you are not being integrous, if you are not being moral, if you're really kind of dodging that gray area for personal self-gain, even that in itself isn't kingdom, because self-preservation is not the king.
Sure.
So we can even touch that in a second. But the point is, what I'm trying to get them to see within a business occupation is the devil blessing your practices to keep you blinded from what God could truly have of you. You could truly be influential with the way you speak, with the nature of who you connect with, the way you hang out with people, the way you serve people. And I think that's one thing that Nexus does super well, is because it's cohesive. It's through and through, whether it's from the front desk, whether it's from your advertising, whether it's from your service. Once they get over the learning curve of what exactly it is you're doing to their body,
Mm-hmm.
it's through and through trying to get them to have a clean, healthy bill of focus so that they get the optimal results. So that's kind of like just an overarching view of what is a kingdom business.
Yep.
And that's, if we can go granular, but it's just a matter of being able to differentiate is my practice building what God's integrous system and design was?
Yep.
Or is it self-sufficient and self-preserving because that's what I actually think at the end of the day? Because a lot of times we'll create businesses because they want to make a lot of money.
Sure.
And they think that that brings them happiness. And then it thinks it's going to bring protection for their family. You don't think the devil would bless that really bent character trait, pulling you further and further from the design of God? So that, like, at a fundamental level, is to understand it. And just one little other bit. Just because you call it one thing doesn't make it that thing. And
Sure.
I think even more so if you're bold enough to label your company something and then mislead people, you better be careful, because God is very specific in the Bible where he says you ought not to be teachers because it comes with a harsher penalty. So that correction is towards the church leadership.
Yeah.
But we can extrapolate the principle of God's heart, which is, if you're misleading people professionally and you're using their money for selfish intentions to hurt them and give them false promises,
Yep.
best believe there is a harsher correction coming for you and you don't realize it. Does that mean that God's going to hurt you? No, but God might permit certain things like an audit to check yourself, or potentially a lawsuit because you didn't do what you said, or you might lose a key employee and then they're like, why did all this happen? Dude, you've been slimy and taking shortcuts for years.
Yeah.
Be thankful that that's the least amount of what God allowed. So that's another one that I like to touch on, is like being careful.
So what's like you mentioned the idea of like the enemy blessing you to blind you.
Yeah.
So can you give me a concrete example of that? I don't know, maybe some of you
Yeah.
coach, you can even use me as an example if you
No.
want to. But just to kind of illustrate, because I kind of have an idea, but I would love to just hear it from the
Yeah.
master of like, what does that look like on a practical level?
Yeah. So we always think about when Jesus got baptized,
Mhm.
and, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased, the descending of the dove, that moment. And then he goes into the wilderness. The devil offers him a compromise. If you're the son of God, which is an identity declaration, which he challenges him 3 times in it. But one of them is, if you'll bow down to me, I'll give you all the kingdoms of this earth. Because at that time he had them.
Mhm.
So there was a compromise being offered. If you're willing to take a shortcut, I'll give you what you want, which means he knew the assignment on the man's life.
Yep.
But he was willing to give him a compromise.
Yep.
So sometimes we can take shortcuts. And like, I was at dinner with this individual one time, and they're giving opportunities to be very influential in their industry. And I was letting them know, like, he had this deep conviction that basically God was saying, humble yourself,
Mhm.
meaning don't take it, not yet. And I walked him through a timeline of my life where it took 12 years to get the opportunity to do it the right way.
Yep.
Without taking shortcuts. I took the narrow road.
Yep.
And this guy's on the other side of it. He hasn't stepped into it yet. And I was basically walking him through my testimonies of all these periods and trials. because I was telling him, and this is another one of my little one-offs, is until it's tested, it's never trusted.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be tested. Does God test? No, the Bible specifically says he doesn't, but he'll permit testing. Why? Because he wants us to know what he's built us to be. So I think one of the things is us to understand that if we haven't been tested in certain areas and passed the test, then we can't be entrusted to have deep authority in that realm. That's another level of kingdom. When you have dominion, when you're able to expand authority. So that was one little element. So now going back to the life of Jesus, so the compromise, we have to look at it. If Jesus endured it and passed it, and then God doesn't test us, like it says in the book of James, then there's elements to where, okay, what should I be looking for if I'm really going to expand my industry, my increase, my influences? So those are some of the basic examples. I can get into some of the nuances. I don't mind. So like, here's the guy that comes to mind. Very successful. Probably one of the most when you look at on paper, he was probably one of the most influential and profitable people I had ever coached. And what made this situation really hard for me was part of our intensive experiences is you're going to find out why, like the Bible says, you're bearing bad fruit. You're going to find root systems that are growing things that are unhealthy in you and all around you.
Yep.
And you keep trying to clip the tree instead of pulling the roots out and letting God heal it. And just like a root canal, if you yank it, you don't just put a new tooth. Like you have to let it heal in layers. And so there's like time in between. But anyways, this one person, they jumped in. It took a few months to really like let them get comfortable with what we were going to do and how we did it. And so I could tell this person was a little sketched, like, who are you? What do you do? You're kind of pricey, all these different elements. And that gives me like a read on who he is. I understand their industry. I understand their mindset. I'm not judgmental. I'm just taking an audit because that helps me know how to pray.
Yeah.
That helps me know how to serve. That helps me how to get prepared so that I'm ready. So this person went through one of our 8-week intensives that we do in the group format, and he got wrecked. And what I mean by wrecked is he had deep revelation, he had deep conviction, and he had an opportunity to strategically navigate himself out of it, but it was going to take him probably a couple years. And that's okay. Some things just take time.
Yeah.
After one session, this person decided to not follow through with their commitment. And this particular individual made a multiple quarter commitment. So we offer different package sizes and stuff. And I warned this person. It wasn't about the money. And I told him, this is not about money. If you don't want to pay, but you've already engaged, I'll still meet with you on the side to make sure you navigate this successfully. Because I've done this with hundreds and now a few thousand people over the years. Like, I kind of know what's coming. And they didn't want to listen. And I'm sitting there saying like, dude, listen, you need to understand that what you now know and where it comes from, to not give it its attention that it deserves, you can almost guarantee that the devil is going to come and distract you by giving a bigger company or a bigger project or some expansion in your personal life to distract you from that. So is he blessing you to blind you? Blessing doesn't necessarily mean more money. Just the element of being busy could be a blessing because you don't have to focus.
Yep.
And so that's an example of a very one that's still near to my heart. It took me a few months to navigate it. And even the way of getting out of it for me to be clean, like I even offered supplemental solutions, even being willing, me and my wife had reasoned a certain amount of money, like, hey, we'll give you this much back so that you can find your next experience to get healed. We just want to fund it and like they passed on all of it. But we're still navigating that relationship, which is another element of kingdom. Is the relationship built just on financial transaction, or is there relational equity? So that was a specific example, and it kind of hit all around of like what it means to be blessed and be blinded at the same time.
Cool. I love it. You mentioned in that you mentioned just briefly like authority and dominion.
Yeah.
And I literally just read this morning. And I had a feeling, even when we chatted yesterday, I'm like, probably going to ask about this, but I don't know, because I just want to see where it goes or see where it went and like super authentic. But I think a lot of people talk about authority and probably dominion too, more so authority. But like, since you brought it up, I would love to just get your take on like, give me the difference. What's authority? What's dominion? And then what does that mean if I'm a business owner to have authority, but not in the sense of like, because I'm taking care of clients who look to me as the authority because I'm a doctor. or whatever business owner you are, but more of the like, what is kingdom authority
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah. So first of all, authority is the ability to push the needle of where the territory currently lies.
Yep.
So if you want more authority in real estate, you're going to buy more square footage. So
Mhm.
it expands. Dominion is when the overall environment raises its established value.
Yep.
So when you think about, I sent you a clip about applied biblical economics.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of times when business owners are looking at the best interests of their stakeholders, there was this revelation of a seventh key stakeholder, which was the competition. In a capitalistic society, we're only about ours.
Yep.
That's the, whoever goes out and eats and kills the most, that's what it is. And this should be controversial. Like, if you're hearing what I'm talking about right now and it's starting to rub you a little bit, not necessarily you, but even the audience, that should be evidence that there's residue that is not kingdom in your life.
Yep.
So it's more than a feeling, it's a conviction, and you've never been able to put your finger on it. But anyways, so he was talking about the levels of competition that we as a populace should be able to raise the value of a sector of business so that there's more than enough for everyone.
Yep.
The most basic example for me, we live in South County. It is $7 to $10 for a cup of coffee.
Mhm.
I don't understand it. My wife gets the sugary milkshakes and calls it coffee. I'm like, but mine are half the price. Why? Because I just get the coffee. Like, I understand the margins,
Yeah.
but it's a volume-based business. And so knowing people that are in this sector of business, they have to sell more.
Mhm.
But I was like trying to massage this into one of my friends' minds who has a multi-chain around here. I'm like, what if you just raised the value by $1? Your margins wouldn't be so thin. And by nature, the entire coffee scene would probably match it because you're a trendsetter and you don't realize it.
Yep.
So that's an example of, instead of me trying to sell more volume so that I can stay in business and you might go out and that's not my fault, what if we raise the value of the sector so that there's more than enough to go around and we can actually pay our baristas a little bit higher so that they can actually sustain a life here in South County? That's a differentiation of, I have authority in a specific four-walled experience like our company, whether it's virtual or a storefront. But when you talk about dominion, it's like I'm affecting the entire sector. That's what I would say at a most basic level is the difference between authority and dominion from a kingdom perspective, especially in business.
Got you.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I want to shift a little bit and just, so many people, like, one of the things I love to talk about is success.
Mhm.
And I feel like you kind of mentioned at the beginning, God, I believe part of my purpose is just show people that, like, God put the same thing in all of us,
Mhm.
and not the same purpose, but the ability to be successful, whatever that looks like. So shifting a little bit, give me, like, in your definition, what would you say success looks like
Sure.
for a person?
Sure. Before I address success, can I realign just a little bit something you said?
Sure.
We do all have the same purpose. We do not all have the same assignment.
Yeah.
Our purpose is to exemplify and to recreate the life of Christ through ourselves.
Yep.
We are supposed to literally permeate who he is, the way he thought, because that's what he was offering.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like us to always be reminded, because I had a mentor correct me on that, because I used to say pretty much the same thing.
Yep.
Calling, purpose, assignment, they're not all the same. Our purpose, that was why he died and came back to life, was so that we could have intimate relationship with him on a one-on-one basis. We no longer needed a mediator. We no longer needed a pastor. We no longer needed a system. Once that's destroyed and I have a deep relationship with him, the function of that purpose materializes in a assignment or many assignments.
Sure.
One of the Western fallacies is that our one thing is what's supposed to define us,
Yep.
which usually materializes in our job, which is unfortunate because you're made for so much more than that. So, but again, that's why I did not stay in the church space, and I felt the call to go into the business world was
Right.
to help the self-developmental space, because people were being manipulated and taken advantage of for, again, empty promises and all those different things. But anyways, so that's just a little correction. It's because, again, we're going to talk about kingdom. That's part of this conversation, is we need to have some alignment, because if we don't even press on some things, we just assume, oh, that's what it is.
Yep.
It is so multifaceted, kingdom. God can express it to you in a very unique way, and then you become the authoritative voice to help others in that specific area. Success. So oftentimes in success, you're marked as how much margin did you produce?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have enough, you don't stay in business.
Yep.
I would argue that what you as an individual mark as success reveals to me where your heart truly lies.
Mhm.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of use some of the red letter theology, which is the words of Jesus in the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke,
Yep.
John, while also using it in a narrative language so that we have some common phrasing. Okay. Jesus talks about easily, like, show me where your treasures are, or show you where your heart is.
Sure.
I'm going to extrapolate the principle and I'm going to place it on the entrepreneur or the business owner. What are your success markers?
Yep.
For some, it may be, I want to hit a certain threshold because it's competitive by nature. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's other successes. What about the ability to employ a handful of people
Mhm.
and give them the opportunity to have a above average lifestyle in an area that says they shouldn't be able to?
So good.
That's a success marker.
Yeah.
You know, have you been able to keep people I've been a part of experiences where I've been somewhere for 10 years and I wasn't making the most amount of money when I could have probably made near double in different companies.
Yep.
Why did I stay? Because I believed in the family that took a risk on me and I wanted to honor them because I gave them my word that we would get them through certain storms and they are been in the thick of them. That's a success marker to me. I
Yep.
didn't just take the quick thing. I felt convicted to stay. So what are your successes? I would continue. I'm going to press because we could talk about business and we should, but I will always say who you are behind the scenes shows up in a company. It's easy to see. Your employees, if they like you, they might tell you. If they trust you, they will tell you.
Yep.
That's another marker. Kingdom is we live in the light. You know, I don't tell my soul to everybody. I know I'm kind of taking us a little bit sidestep, but I am, the way I've explained it to people is I share pieces of me with a few people so that I feel that I'm fully seen on all sides,
Yep.
but not by more than one person. My wife knows a lot about me. She knows probably more than most, but there are certain things that only me and God talk about that when I'm comfortable, I might bring into conversation with her.
Yeah.
It's not because I don't trust her. And even then, people have been violated in trust. They don't want to share with their spouse. I totally get it. That's just sidebar. But there are certain places where I've prioritized the little parts of my heart. So to me, that's a marker of success.
Mm-hmm.
Does God truly have full access to point out anything that keeps me from him?
So good.
And then usually that will show up quickly in marriage. Because for those of us who are married or you think you want to be married, they easily remind you whether or not you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yep.
And I like that, even though it's frustrating. My wife will tell you, he's really good at apologizing. And I thought it was kind of an insult when she said that one day. But what I realized was she didn't even have to tell me my answer. I just kind of chewed on it by myself. The reason why I'm good at apologizing isn't because I just have to apologize a lot, even though I do. It's because when I apologize, I'm apologizing to the area that hurt her specifically. I'm pulling out that little thing, that stinger.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's a mark of success. So see, I'm purposely taking the long route before we get to success in business, because if you're not well at an individual level and you're not really feeling seen and being challenged in a very deep, intimate way, and then you have a marriage that's tense or it's not fruitful, meaning you're not actually making memories, you're not actually happy to see each other, you don't actually miss each other throughout the day.
Yep.
And then you step into the parenting and it's the robotic, monotonous having to do these things. By the time you get to work, you're like, yeah, I just want to go make money because I'm going to buy the next thing. I'm going to go to the next place. And yeah, that'll keep you excited for a short-term rush. That's why there's a high concentration between people who have done business and have been drug addicts, because there's an exhilaration. There's a it's exhilarating to cut a big deal or whatever. So successes have different markers to them is what I took a long way out of saying that. But now within business, I did touch on employees. I did touch on bottom lines. Even potentially, you always have to make the decision when you're creating a company. Am I going too far?
No, dude, keep going.
Okay.
This is great.
Okay. So anytime I talk with an entrepreneur and they actually care about what I have to say, I always, because people don't, sometimes they're just trying to get freebies from you. That's why I added that. Like they'll just sit there around you and they're just trying to grab something quick. And that's why they're stuck in self-preservation. But for the ones who actually want it, I tend to ask them a very hard-nosed question. I said, did you build this to sell it or scale it? Because those are two very different strategies. It's no different when you're dating. Are you dating because you're bored, or are you dating because you're looking for the other one?
Yeah.
So in business, if you're building to scale, then that's a whole different attribute. So your success markers have to be in that diagram.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking to sell it, it's a completely different thing. You're just trying to make it robust enough to have a multiplier enough so that somebody says, that's worth me undertaking the responsibility. So successes have different things like that. Successes. I know this one's not going to be sexy, paying your tax bill on time. That's a success marker.
Yep,
If
for
we're going to
sure.
rise above and be kingdom, I've had the Holy Spirit whispered to me so many times in my personal space, render to Caesar what is Caesar's. And you know what's funny is people who aren't even Christians or believers in Jesus know what that statement means.
Yep.
So it's an economically understood principle that people are evading in a business practice. And then they wonder why they can't flourish. Could God, in his sovereignty, be withholding expansion, dominion, authority, etc., because if he gave you more, your tax bill would get even bigger and then you wouldn't pay it? There's a guy I've been coaching for a year for free. Why do you do that? Because I care about people. I'm not here to flex. I'm just saying sometimes it's not in my best interest to shoo someone off because they can't pay.
Yep.
That's another principle of kingdom. It's called generosity. But this specific person, they're multiple years behind due on taxes. Like, we're getting into a part where he could potentially go to jail. He doesn't think that, but I know the law. Like,
Yep.
tax evasion is a big deal.
Of course.
Like, and all I'm trying to say is if he's so afraid to not call a lawyer and ask, what should I do?
Yep.
So at least he kind of has an idea. Like, he's not in dominion and he's not in kingdom. And thankfully, this man humbled himself. He confessed to me. He's like, you're right. I shouldn't be saying that I'm a kingdom entrepreneur. I'm not following kingdom principles. I'm not doing as God would ask me to do. I said, you actually have a shot of making it out of this now, because that revelation, to be confident enough to confess it and share it, might have created a way out. That's what Romans 8:28 says. He'll create a way.
Yep.
Why did he create a way? Because you finally got honest with yourself. So that's another example of what does success look like? Is just an honest approach towards payroll, towards taxes, etc. So I go on for days about success, but it's always going to go back to inner virtues.
For sure. Which goes back to that. I don't know if you call it a pyramid, but that's what it's
The
shaped like, so-
leadership, what did I say? The leadership ladder of leverage.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
It's a ladder.
Yeah.
All right. So, if there was like, if you had to give somebody one piece of advice,
Yeah.
that would be, and you could only give one.
Yeah.
That was like, here's what I would do to, let's just say, get the priorities of that ladder in line.
Yeah.
Or we could go, if for anybody who's like maybe not on that, like such a like hardcore Christian level, if we
Sure.
just said, if somebody wants to be successful,
Yeah.
and you just defined it, I think, in a beautiful way, but
Yep.
if somebody wants to be successful, what's like number one piece of advice that you would give almost anybody
Yeah.
if you could only give one?
Yeah, in a non-faith-based conversation, and we're just strictly talking about how to build a business, pay yourself lavishly first.
So good.
The book is called Profit First by Mike McCallowitz. That book, it gave me a template of a runway of how to start a company.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know.
Yeah.
I knew, because I'm a business major and I've been around business guys, that everybody flunks out because they run out of cash. So I was like, okay, if it's a cash flow problem, and I'm really good at budgeting in my personal finances, then I was like, okay, that's got to be a principle. So when I read the book, it was just a cut and paste template.
Yeah.
So like, don't make it hard on yourself. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. But what you're going to learn in that principle is pay yourself lavishly, which is a fair market wage.
Yeah.
Because if you aren't excited to do what you're doing, you will quit very quickly.
No doubt.
And I have found that what used to excite me at a certain threshold doesn't excite me anymore. Not the people excite me,
Mm-hmm.
but I've learned that as I've raised the entry prices or the experiences or the intangibles that they'll get because of being a part of these experiences now, it's more exciting.
Yeah.
Why? Because I can do more. If you make more, you can reach more. You can help your community more. So yeah, I would say principle one was pay yourself lavishly.
So good.
And you got to learn what that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, I will say lavishly does not mean that you make everything and your company has nothing. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
But I'm saying just enough to make you feel excited to get up and do it again. Because there's
Mhm.
going to be days you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't pay yourself first, like we talked about this on another episode, it's like breaking down the percentages. If you don't pay yourself first,
Yeah.
then all your money's gonna go to other places, and then you'll be the lowest paid employee in
Yeah.
your business, which I see all the time.
Well, the thing too, if I could just add this, what's interesting about that book that I really enjoyed was it also helps you integrate, for those of you guys who haven't read it, but if you have, humor me with just reminding you, is it also puts a self-correcting bonus experience in
Yep.
there so that you actually get a quarterly bonus.
Yep.
So like, again, I know that would be getting into the weeds, but that's what I loved about it. Is like, okay, I'm going to take a fixed payroll, but if I know how to break my percentages down and I'm putting a little bit extra into that profit account, I get a quarterly bonus.
Yep.
That's actually really exciting when you are when you're starting a company or you only have a couple employees, where it's like, because no one else is going to bonus you.
Yeah.
Like, so if you don't bonus yourself,
Yeah.
you don't get to do something fun. And what I love with those things is we get to do things that we didn't know. Sometimes it's for us. Sometimes we give it out. It doesn't matter. But yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple times. I want you to just give people like a quick breakdown of your business, what you do, who you help. Because one, full disclosure, like it changed my life. And I was, I met with Kevin this morning and we were talking about all the stuff that's happened over the course of the last couple months of like not surfing. And I think the biggest thing that's come up for me, and I shared this with you before, so it's not a secret. I don't think it's a secret to anybody in this room, is that the peace and lack of stress that I have, even in the, like, we could say the storm, has been like next level. So from spending time in your programs with the people that you coach and the way that you do it, give us like a rundown just quickly of like, here's what I do, here's what it's all about. And then I'll have one last question for you.
Oh, just one. So my company's name is Confluence Consulting and Coaching. So it's the merging of what consulting and coaching looks like. That's why we landed on that. We help small to medium enterprises, typically business owners or high-level decision makers, how to reinforce their value systems and their foundations of their identity so that they can lead well and serve well. That is at a very macro level, what it is. How we do it, Myron Golden always says you sell the results and they buy the tactics, which I think is kind of a healthy way of putting it. Whether he said it first or not, that's how I heard it. How we do that is through a group experience where people are held accountable by just regulating, sharing by these value systems that we've reinforced through some our biblical nature. We're now re-articulating the language to touch the business owner's life a little bit more because it affects their marriage, it affects their relationships. So, but that's in essence what we do is through a group dynamic. And then there's a spinoff where I work with people one-on-one for extended periods of time because it just takes time.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been around for a year and a half, but we were friends for like 6 months before we even did any of that. And it was never even on the table. It was kind of like, you want to see this? And you're a very hungry person. You're always looking for the next competitive edge. And I'm glad to see what God's done in you. But the way I knew it was real was because of the way your family described it, the way your close friends did it, the way your employees have done it, they explained it. So that's how I knew something special happened. Kingdom came inside of you. It regulated what was still kind of being swayed. So,
And then if people want to find you, how do they do that? And
so my address is, no, I'm just kidding. No, it's funny because if you look me up on my Instagram, you're like, that guy has no influence. Probably not, because I don't have time.
This will change that. This is going to change it.
So our website is whatkeptyouwon'tkeepyou.com.
Cool.
Yeah. And that gives you pretty much a synopsis of what we do, how we do, some breakthroughs. You were kind enough to give us a testimony. So your face is on there. You got a big smile. But that's there. And then there's a small application if you're interested. Otherwise, you can just reach out and we can talk about things. There's many different ways, but usually we like to funnel it through the group experience because you meet some people who want to grow too.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think there's something special about a community and relationships and vulnerability, which is powerful as well. Last question.
Going fast.
If you could only share one piece of advice with everybody listening, this is like we don't even have to say everybody listening. We could just say like last words. You could only share one piece of advice to bring people closer to their purpose, which is the same for all of us, not their assignment. Assignment's a piece of it, but man, what would that advice be?
It's too easy to say the obvious, that a life surrendered to the power of God will not transform in incomprehensible ways. But that is the focal point. And that is a huge leap for some people because of so many different modalities of confusion that have wrapped around their mind. And so I would ask them to consider to just give him an opportunity to show himself strong on their behalf. What does that look like? Sometimes we're in a dire place that we don't know how to get ourselves out of. Worse, we think we will figure it out and it gets worse and it gets worse and we don't know how to ask for help. Don't be surprised that if you give him a crack of hope, he doesn't show up through people. Why does God use people? Because we're made in his image. So sometimes those people that are going to come across, you didn't realize they needed you. Jamie and I didn't know how much we needed you guys to be seen in a city where most people are focused on themselves and their families. So I would let people know deeply, just give them an opportunity,
Yeah.
not with your mouth. And you don't even have to tell anybody, but make a decision in here. And when you do that, watch what happens for those who haven't made that.
Yep.
But for the audience at large, the one thing I would say, and it's one thing I continue to champion, just keep going. Don't quit.
So good.
At the end of the day, don't quit. Believe that see, that's why we have the extra advantage, if you will. He's going to show up strong on our behalf. Sometimes I had a friend who's a mentor at some capacity say, I've had to go to zero many times to grow to the next thing. And it's hard and it hurts. What I learned from that is sometimes I think God lets us go to zero, whatever that means. Maybe no friendships, no money, whatever, because where we're headed, none of that old stuff is allowed to come to the new thing. And there is some biblical truth behind that. But yeah, just don't quit. Just muster it up, whatever you got. It's not about, it's just like marriage. It's not 100%. It's you just give what you got the best you can. And the other person shows up and somehow things come up and there's gold coins in fish's mouth everywhere. It's kind of weird. So,
Dude, so good. Well, I appreciate the time and the energy and the friendship and all of just how you lead people, dude, and show up for people. You're one of those people who, we talk about like being inconvenienced, and you will be inconvenienced for almost anybody and still show up. And it's special and it's palpable. And if you're listening, then I hope that you would go back and re-listen, because the stuff that he says holds true time and time again. It has in my life. So, dude, from my heart, I'm just grateful to spend the time to get to record this with you, dude. And hopefully we'll do many, many more.
so glad to be given the opportunity.
Love you, bro.
Love you too, man.
All right, fam. We'll come at you next week. Peace.